NBS Happening Now.
To NBS Happening Now. I am Mordecai Mulisa, and now the conversation is going to be about the Uganda's climate change, and it's going to be an official launch of the update of Uganda's national determined contribution and the development of Uganda's long-term strategy on climate change. It's going down at Sheraton Hotel.
We'll take on a prayer. Dear Lord God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the gift of life. We pray that you will be amidst us and guide all our deliberations today. In the name of God, we've prayed. And you can take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Well, for introduction purposes, my name is Mildred Tuhaise. I work with NBS Television as a show host and a news anchor. Because of the masks and COVID-19 time, sorry, you can't see my entire face. I'll have to keep my mask on, definitely. Request, as earlier on communicated, that we will all keep our masks on. Thankfully, we are socially distanced, and in case you need to sanitize, you will use the sanitizer right on your table. On each and every table, there is a sanitizer that has been booked for you right there. COVID-19 is real, it is still with us, and we need to follow the standard operating procedures and protect ourselves. As I did say, this is the official launch of the update of Uganda's nationally determined contribution and the development of Uganda's long-term strategy on climate change. We clearly know that in 2015, up to 197 countries, including Uganda, did sign the new International Climate Accord, the Paris Agreement, that clearly aims to solidify a global response to the threat of climate change. There are a number of expectations right there, and each and every country has to domesticate the expectations and how they are supposed. We became the first country in Africa to develop the nationally determined contribution and partnership plan that sets a result-based framework. And in this, part of the commitments Uganda is making is that it will be reducing its carbon emissions by 22%. And I love the fact that Uganda is already setting an example, because we do have the climate change bill that is set to serve as a legal backing to support the government's commitment towards this very nationally determined contribution. We know Uganda is 68% or there above of the population of Uganda is dependent on agriculture. And because of issues of climate change, we've seen adverse effects, negative effects on agriculture, to crop yields, and a number of the changing weather patterns, because we've not respected the environment. The environment can live without us, ladies and gentlemen, but we can't live without the environment. That is why we need to pay attention to it. And I'm very glad that this discussion is coming through today. And without wasting any more time, allow me invite a person who will be representing the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Water and Environment, and this is the Director, Environment Affairs, Mr. Oloya Collins, to give us the welcome remarks. Mr. Oloya Collins, we do welcome you, please.
The Honourable Minister of Water and Environment, the chairpersons of the Parliamentary Committee on Natural Resources and Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change, all the ambassadors present, development partners present, representatives of government ministries, departments and agencies present, representatives of the private sectors, civil society organizations, and academia present, colleagues from the Ministry of Water and Environment, the print and electronic media present, all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Collins Oloya. I'm the Director of Environment Affairs, but I'm standing in front of you here to represent the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Water and Environment. He could not be with you here physically, but spiritually and morally, he's with you. He has gone to a trip in Western Uganda to validate the functionalities of all the water and sanitation and environment interventions in Western Uganda. So that became a priority because he has to validate and ascertain that the ministry is doing the right thing before the president goes to commission them. So that is why he's not here with us. But let me take this opportunity to read his message, this welcome message. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you to this important event of launching the nationally determined contribution update process and the long-term climate change strategy development. As most of you may be aware, Uganda developed and submitted its nationally determined contribution in 2015 to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change as a requirement under the Paris Agreement. Consistent with Article 4.9 of the Paris Agreement on successive updates every 5 years, Uganda has started the process of updating its NDC. And this is the key reasons why you have been invited for this launch. That's why you are here. Ladies and gentlemen, Uganda has made incredible progress towards implementing actions that will contribute to its NDC achievement. In 2018, Uganda became the first country to develop an NDC partnership plan that sets a result-based framework for coordinating mitigation and adaptation actions towards the national climate and development goals. Several development partners are supporting the implementation of the NDC partnership under this arrangement. Uganda has strengthened its enabling environment for the NDC implementation and continues to leverage targeted technical and financial support for the NDC implementation. For example, ladies and gentlemen, the climate change bill is set to serve as a legal backing to support the government's commitment towards the NDC implementation. Relatedly, the government of Uganda, through the ministry, started the process of developing its long-term strategy on climate change. The Paris Agreement invites countries to communicate their mid-century long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies. This should be based on their common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in the light of different national circumstances. So take this point. It should be dependent on a differentiated responsibility and respective capability in the light of different national circumstances. We don't have the same. USA has different national circumstances. China has different. Uganda has different, etc., etc. So when we're developing, we should base ourselves on those principles. Ladies and gentlemen, the long-term strategy will be central to the goal of limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees centigrade and to pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees centigrade, representing a significant opportunity for countries to lay out their vision for achieving a low-emission economy by 2050, while pursuing sustainable development, increasing resilience. The objective of the revision of Uganda NDC and the development of the long-term strategy is to strengthen ownership for the implementation of the NDC and the LTC, and to explore the existing opportunity to increase national ambition in climate action to deliver a climate-resilient development and reduce vulnerabilities of the population to the impacts of the climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, the two processes shall basically focus on the following. One, reviewing and ensuring the alignment with the existing and emerging policy and measures. For example, I talk of the climate change bill. It should be in tandem to that. And the NDP3, which we have just started this year, it should be in tandem to that. Two, elaborating and quantifying adaptation and mitigation targets. Three, incorporation of new sectors not included in the current NDC. Four, inclusion of new low carbon and climate resilient technologies. Five, ensuring greater synergies with the national program development plans and the SDGs. You know, the country is now adopting program planning and budgeting approach. So it should be in line with that. Six, assessing cost of mitigation and adaptation opportunities and the relevant investment needed. Seven, monitoring progress and strengthening impact in transparency, as well as timely reporting of the outcomes. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ministry of Water and Environment is committed to build the capacity of the Climate Change Department through strengthening the functionality of the department by ensuring that there is sufficient and qualified staffing and also provision of minimum operational financial support so that the department is capable of mobilizing, coordinating, and reporting on the revised NDC and the developed LTC. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me, therefore, to express my sincere gratitude to the United Nations Development Programme and the German Development Corporation with funding from European Union. All these, the representatives are here, from the European Union, Spain, German government, who have extended both the technical and financial support to Uganda's government through my ministry to ensure the two processes move smoothly and concurrently. In the same vein, I appreciate the staff from my ministry, especially the Climate Change Department, for the technical work done to guide the two processes. And as I said, the ministry has promised to strengthen the technical and advocacy capacity for this department to shoulder these new emerging issues. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. And I've said this for God and my country, and on behalf of the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Water and Environment, Alfred Okoto TV, sign. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oloya Collins. And without taking any more time, I know many of us would like to understand the very reason why we're here and probably get an update on how this development is going to take place and the objective of this very launch. Allow me invite the Acting Commissioner of the Climate Change Department in the Ministry of Water and Environment, Mr. Bob Natifu, to take us through this. Welcome, sir.
Okay, thanks very much, Mildred. The Honorable Minister, sir, the Resident Representative, UNDP, the Head of EU Delegation, DFID, and all distinguished delegates. Good morning. As introduced, my name is Bob Natif, and I was asked to give some kind of general overview of why we're here and maybe why we delved into this process. And I've tried to frame my discussion under two main headers. So I'll be quite brief because of time. I have only 2 slides, but I'll speak to those in about 5-10 minutes. So the framing, as I said, is under 2 broad themes: why the LTS, or why the NDC enhancement process, and what that means to us. Next slide, please. Please move in the slide. Okay, I hope that's visible enough to people. Just as a refresher because I see most of the people in the room have been part of this for quite some time. If you recall, in 2015, the world embarked on a very ambitious agenda. The agenda to address sustainable development goals on one part, but also the agenda to address the runaway climate change. That's why we came up with that very ambitious agenda in 2015. But at the heart of that agreement is the mitigation targets. For instance, meeting temperature rise well below 2 degrees centigrade while maintaining 1.5 on the table. The screen is off, but I can continue speaking if you need. Limiting temperature rise to well below 2 degrees centigrade while keeping 1.5 on the table. But also the concept of balancing emissions and sources to net zero in the second half of the century. Most importantly, the issue of having the 5-year NDC cycle. So those are like the 2 key points that we're really making reference to this morning. The issue of meeting net zero in the second half of the century, but also the issue of ensuring that countries submit NDCs on a 5-year cycle. Of course, there are other things to do with the mechanisms that we have created and so on and so forth. Now that's on the mitigation part. But adaptation also had a place too. When we talk about things like the global goal for adaptation, adaptation communications, and most importantly, loss and damage, which as a vulnerable country, it puts a spot on our side. Then there are also issues to do with financing, talking about the collective goal to raise $100 billion between that time and 2020. So the question that we should be asking ourselves, what then does that mean to Uganda? Should we go to the next slide? What that means on the face of it is that if we try to develop robust NDCs or NDCs, we'll be responding to the commitments under the obligations that we've signed up and ratified to, which is a plus on our part. And then it also means that every after 5 years, it's supposed to respond to that 5-year cycle. Except, and this is where the kicker is, that there are specific decisions in the Paris Agreement itself that speak to how countries, depending on the time frame that you prefer to in your NDC, our NDC speaks to reducing emissions by 22% by 2030, which means our time frame is was starting between 2015 and 2030. And yet what it says, the particular decision, there are two decisions. The first decision of the COP requesting all parties whose intended nationally determined contribution pursuant to Decision 1 CP 2020 contains a time frame up to 2025. You should mark that. A time frame up to 2025 to communicate by 2020, so we are now in 2020, to communicate by 2020 a new nationally determined contribution, and to do so every after 5 years. So what does that mean? That means that to countries, and I think there are 13 of those who put a time frame between 2015 and 2025, for countries that have their NDCs running up to a time frame of 2025, ideally are supposed to communicate new NDCs. It means that if a country X committed to reduce emissions by 2025 by maybe 5%, the subsequent submission that you make now should indicate a progression beyond the original that you indicated. So it can't be that you're going to maintain 5%. The second key important decision is Decision 24, which also requests parties whose INDC pursuant to Decision 1 CP20 has a time frame of up to 2030. And this is where we clearly fall as Uganda, because as I said, our time frame was from 2015 to 2030. To communicate or update by 2020 the contributions, and to do so every after 5 years. So the question you'll ask, so what does that mean? So it merely means that, okay, it's that clear differences here. The first one was new, the second one is merely updating what you have communicated previously. But you can choose to make it more ambitious, because there's also a chapter on ambition when it comes to NDCs. So that will be determined based on the kind of ambition that we put forward, either introducing a new sector compared to the original ones that we have earlier referred to, or considering other things that we may think add to emission reductions. But most importantly, things that speak to adaptation on our part and improving individual livelihood and well-being. So that's on the part of NDCs. In contrast, we also have the long-term strategies, and there's also specific decisions to that, as you can see on the front, that parties are encouraged to communicate by 2020 to the Secretariat their mid-century or long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies in accordance with Article 4, Paragraph 19 of the agreement. The important thing here to note is that as a country, we have national aspirations, which are well defined in for example, the Vision 2040. Vision 2040 speaks to translating us from a peasantry to a prosperous nation. But to achieve that, we're actually looking at exploring sectors like oil and gas, engaging in agriculture, but also minerals, ICT, and so on and so forth. So you can see a bit of dilemma that there is moving this LTS forward vis-a-vis NDC. But it's something good that we must do, because then this process is going to help us ask questions. How do we transform this economy, or how do we survive into a carbon neutral world? So what does it mean to go carbon neutral by mid-century or towards the end of the century? So for us, I think as a ministry, we are very pleased to be a part of this conversation. And this alone, I think, sets pace onto the kind of meaningful conversation that we are going to have in preparation of what's to come, either mid-century or towards the end of the century. Let's not mind whether you'll be available or not, but that's one of the dilemmas that we have in framing these climate change policies. But the assurance is this is going to be a very consultative process so that we come to a common goal of ensuring that we come up with something that can help not just Uganda as such, but contribute to the global dimension of the contribution that we're trying to make. With that, I'd like to thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bob. I totally understand where Uganda is, especially when we're talking about Vision 2040. We are talking about the industrialization agenda because we're dealing with import substitution, the realization that comes with COVID-19. And yet we also have to protect our environment and our commitment to reduce the emissions by 22% by 2030. But I do believe that with such discussions going forward, there is a lot of notes to pick from. We can borrow leaves from other countries on how they've managed or even take up the entire branch. Without wasting any more time, allow me invite Dr. Suman Gulova, the Director, Development Planning, to represent the Deputy Director, National Planning Authority. Welcome, Dr. Gulova.
Thank you, Mildred. Honorable Minister of Water and Environment, members of Parliament, present and participating, heads of development partners delegations, all government colleagues present and those participating, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. My name again is Asman Glover. I'm Director, Development Planning, National Planning Authority. I'm here to represent my Executive Director. I know this will come out later in newspapers, but he has had a personal loss. He just lost his dad this morning. So we are mourning NPA because of that. That said, it's my pleasure to be here to provide remarks on the launch of the revision of Uganda's climate plan, also referred to as Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC. Because for us, this is very key, actually from the planning angle. As you are aware, National Planning Authority has just finalized the third National Development Plan, which we have started implementing this financial year. And that this plan, for those of you who are not aware, this plan is about, the goal of this plan is basically increasing household incomes and improving the quality of life. And this, almost like what my colleague has just talked to, is through sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. Now, the dilemma here is when you talk of NDCs and then you are targeting industrialization, some people may think you are actually being talking two sides of the same coin. So, but first the same thing. The beauty of it, as I was talking to you later, is that a newcomer in development, there's a lot that you can learn, even when industrializing, to do it in a better way, whereby you are not worsening the carbon print. That said, this goal clearly, if you look at it, the achievement of the NDP goal is highly hinged on addressing climate change adaptation and mitigation in its entirety. And why are we saying this? Because if you look at our goal of increasing household income, if you unpack households in Uganda, 68% are in subsistence sector, and they depend on rain-fed agriculture. 70% in agriculture. So meaning the issue of climate change becomes key. Indeed, if you go further and unpack it a bit more, you realize that if you look at our performance as Uganda economically, there is a bit of trend. Every time the climate doesn't behave very well, we have a drought, so are the economic figures. When you have very good rains, so do economic figures improve. Meaning the issue of climate change is very key to achievement of NDP goal of improving household incomes, and therefore in the planning angle, the plan that we are talking about was informed by the SDGs, particularly the goal 13 on the action to combat climate change. Because for us, this is a no-go area. If we are to achieve the goal that we are looking for, it means we need to sort out the issue of climate change. Going further, if you unpack the NDP further, it also highlights climate change as one of the development threats with implications on achievement of development strategies, and in particular, agriculture production and productivity, income poverty, and as I've already talked to, economic growth. But more to my heart, the issue of gender equality, because majority of the statistics I unpacked is mainly our youth and women who are employed here. That meaning that anything that will play around with climate change, it directly impacts our women in this country, because they're the ones who are, the majority of whom who are in the subsistence sector. Now, for this reason, NDP not only integrates climate change across all the 18 programs, because NDP has adapted a programmatic approach, and we have 18 programs that are going to achieve the 5 objectives that we have in NDP. But beyond us ensuring climate change is a cross-cutting issue, we have a specific program that tackles climate change in its entirety. And this program basically looks at issues that we are facing, the mitigation that we are facing, because a poor person, if you are dealing with incomes of people, there are two things they face. When there's a drought, they are not well, because they cannot, whatever they plant cannot come out. When it rains and overrains, again they have problems, because there will be floods and then their crops will be destroyed. So climate change becomes a key issue if we are going to deal with the development aspirations that we are looking to as a country. The revision of the climate change plan, therefore, presents an opportunity to not only renew our commitment to climate change, but also enhances our ambition to match with the growing severity of climate change effects on development, as I've already talked to. Now, for us in Uganda, therefore, climate action planning becomes key. When you look at Uganda Vision 2040 and NDP, these provide a basis, an entry point into climate change planning and action at macro level. Then this presents an opportunity to unpack these broad climate change strategic interventions into climate-specific adaptation and mitigation actions with disaggregated targets and indicators to measure progress at both the macro level and the micro level, so that we're able to deal with this. Therefore, for us, NDC review is timely. This is the time to do it. It also coincides. Why is it timely? Because it is coinciding with the planning cycle we have just released the NDP3. So now is the time to start talking about these issues so that as we start implementing NDP3, these are the issues that we need to put into place. Now, as you are aware, that after we delivered NDP3, we are trying to do what we refer to as implementation planning. How do we implement NDP3? How do we ensure that NDP3 is financed? And what we are doing here, we are delivering what we refer to as program implementation action plans. These will be the link between the NDP3 and the national budget. And that's what we are working on, that we are trying to do this. Again, the conversation we are having becomes timely because it has to fit into these issues that we are talking about. In the course of revision process, we should not lose also track of the lessons. We should not lose track of the lessons that we have done, that came from implementation of the first NDC. And we should ensure that the revised NDC translates into transformative climate change action that builds adaptive capacity along a low carbon development pathway. This is key because as a country, we normally write very good papers, write very many good reports, but the actual implementation is key. So let us learn from what we have seen in the past so that we try to do it better in the future. As I conclude, I'm optimistic that the reviewed NDC will provide concrete guidance on how to pursue a prioritized climate change responsive action in the next 5 years. This will provide the impetus on the implementation of climate change actions. I also want to urge all of us to pay attention to NDC revision process since it will prove our development process against climate risk, and this will be key to achievement of our development goals. I also acknowledge that achieving economic development and transformation requires a holistic approach that caters for all facets in the development process, including factors of climate change. Therefore, I want to call upon all of us, state, non-state actors, to be champions and agents of positive change that we want in all aspects of life. And here, what I'm asking is that we should take development at personal level, not wait for the state. If you are to ask issues of climate change, when did you last plant a tree at personal level? These are issues we need to take at heart. Let us not wait for everybody to tell us what to do. There are small things that we can do. Each of us can contribute with small steps. Lastly, let me take this opportunity to thank all our development partners, particularly UNDP, who have been with us when we are working in this area. Thank you very much, including the EU and all the development partners with us. Lastly, let me also thank all the participants for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suman Guloba. And I love the fact that when we're talking about industrialization, we say sustainable industrialization. And we definitely have to pay attention to climate change. And he did challenge us, while we continue to speak about climate change, just how much attention do you personally pay to climate change or to the environment? We often see a number of people driving on the streets and they keep throwing out plastic bottles because they've finished taking their water or drink. And yet we also want to go ahead. If you personally cannot pay attention to what you're speaking about, then it doesn't speak to your heart. We need to take action ourselves. And we also do have His Excellency Matthias Shoa online, and we will be getting his message immediately. He's been in and he has a meeting that he has to be rushing to. So allow me to invite His Excellency Matthias Shoa, the Ambassador Government of Germany, who is online to speak to us. Your Excellency, please get to speak to us.
Thank you very much. In many countries, COVID-19 has become the top priority because it is having a very negative impact level, although its impacts are happening at a much slower rate.
All right, go ahead. We had lost you.
Thank you. Climate change is a global challenge, and to contain global challenges effectively, it needs combined efforts on the global level and to support interventions at individual country level. Considering that NDCs are central to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement, the German government, together with Morocco and other countries, initiated a global partnership on the implementation of NDCs, the NDC Partnership. The German government would like to congratulate the government of Uganda on its efforts of prioritizing climate action in the various national processes and, of course, in this effort of NDC revision. Germany has been a key partner in the formulation and implementation of Uganda's NDC Partnership Plan, which outstandingly was the first NDC Partnership Plan in Africa. The German government supports the NDC Partnership both financially and politically. Since the launch of the partnership, the German government, the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and the Ministry of Environment have provided support amounting to 500 million euros. The new climate action enhancement package is now being supported with almost 17 million euros and the partnership secretariat with 12 million euros. Significantly, the German government through GIZ is supporting the development of Uganda's long-term emission and climate resilience strategy, the LTS, as a direct response to a request from the government of Uganda to the NDC partnership under the Climate Action Enhancement Package. Several priority areas in Uganda's nationally determined contributions are supported by German-funded projects, including Global Carbon Market Program, enhanced water security and sanitation, promotion of renewable energy and energy efficiency, promotion of rural development, and the Nile Basin Initiative. The LTS should provide a long-term climate vision under which Uganda can set its 5-year NDC priorities, defined in more concrete terms of individual sectors such as energy, agriculture, forestry, and urban development. LTSs serve the purpose of supporting policy alignment by introducing a long-term perspective. Policy planning that allows to consider whether certain activities may create long-term lock-ins effect. They also provide certainty and credibility by promoting the acceptability of ambitious climate mitigation across different stakeholders. On a personal note, protecting the environment is an issue that has been close to my heart as a citizen of this planet, but also in my previous postings. Decades ago, it was only discussed by environmentalists. Today, fortunately, many governments have understood that this is a matter of survival. I'm very pleased and encouraged that I have the honor to serve in Uganda, a country that takes the global threat of climate change very seriously and lets actions follow its words. Thank you very much for your attention. Mwebale nnyo.
All right, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for speaking to us. And I totally agree with you that Uganda is taking seriously the aspect of climate change. Whenever we are in a rainy season, we get to think about our brothers in Bududa, we get to think about our brothers and sisters in Sironko because of the mudslides, the floods. So we clearly, definitely have to protect the environment. And like I said earlier, the environment can exist without us, but we cannot exist without the environment. And at that, allow me invite the NDC Partnership Global Director, Mr. Pablo Vieira, who has a message for us. And Mr. Pablo, let's get to have that message. Okay, in just a bit, of course, we'll be getting Mr. Pablo Vieira's message. And as we continue, let's have this discussion aired out online using the hashtag NDC Revision UG. That's for a Ugandan audience. But globally, let's also join in with the NDC Revision and also hashtag Climate Emergency. Let's now get Mr. Pablo Vieira's message, please.
Honorable Minister for Water and Environment, Honorable Minister for Finance Planning and Economic Planning, Executive Director of the National Planning Authority, Your Excellencies, Development Partner Representatives, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The NDC Partnership is proud to be a part of this important milestone and celebrates the beginning of Uganda's 2020 NDC updating and the formulation of its first long-term climate strategy. As a first step in our collaboration with Uganda, the NDC Partnership worked with the government and development partners to develop the first partnership plan on the African continent in June 2018. Through this partnership plan, 17 partners are supporting the implementation of the country's first NDC. Uganda has been a champion of the NDC Partnership ever since, and has been an active voice in charting new ways to better support countries with achieving NDC targets and raise their ambition. Our relationship with Uganda is long-term and substantive. As a steering committee member, the government of Uganda has actively guided the direction of the partnership. We extend enormous gratitude to our focal points. Acting Commissioner of the Climate Change Department in the Ministry of Water and Environment, Mr. Bob Natifu, Acting Director of Debt and Cash Management in the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Madame Maris Wanyera, and Head of Trade, Tourism and Production Planning in the National Planning Authority, Mr. Ronald Kadwa. You and your technical teams are instrumental to the partnership's processes in Uganda and globally. The coordinated effort of your institutions has been the foundation from which climate change has so strongly embedded into the fabric of Uganda's development agenda. I also want to acknowledge the tremendous spirit of the late Commissioner Chebet Maikut, the climate giant who started the work of the partnership in Uganda. May he forever rest in peace. Since 2018, Uganda has made inspiring leaps towards the implementation of its NDC by putting in place the institutional arrangements and governance structures that ensure climate and development are closely linked. With the support of the in-country facilitator, Mr. Robert Bakika, supported by the Netherlands, Uganda has been able to use the partnership plan to coordinate members to provide harmonized support towards national objectives for implementation, including the Environment and Climate Change Development Partner Coordination Group, regular reporting on partnership plan contributions, and annual work plans for the implementation of the partnership plan that are gender responsive and socially responsible. There is now better coordination between sectors and with development partners, and information on the current status of NDC implementation is more readily available. And the NDC priority actions, together with SDGs, have been mainstreamed in the third National Development Plan, with the support of UNDP, FAO, and the World Resources Institute. These priorities have also been introduced into the national budget through a climate budget tagging system supported by the World Bank. In terms of strengthening access to climate finance, the partnership members have also rallied behind the government, including the National Development Authority, to develop concept notes at the sectoral level through combined efforts of GIZ, GGGI, UNDP, the African Development Bank, and the World Bank. To strengthen national capacity of officials to prepare projects for finance, the government of the Netherlands is supporting the National Planning Authority to develop concept notes for key projects and training manuals for local officers to write compelling proposals to financial institutions. Of note, These projects include a $50 million integrated landscape approach to water security and livelihood enhancement in the cattle corridor, a $56 million geothermal energy project, and a $12 million program for promoting electric motorcycle taxis in key urban areas. Now, in 2020, amidst the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, Uganda is receiving partnership support to ensure its NDC is at the heart of its economic recovery response. With support from Germany for an economic advisor to support recovery planning, and support from GGGI provided by the UK and the Netherlands for a climate finance advisor, Uganda is well equipped to ensure that climate action sustains all momentum despite the impacts of the virus, and that recovery efforts are aligned with national climate vision. We commend the government of Uganda and its partnership members for acting fast to respond to COVID-19 in a climate-responsive way. Uganda's success is a reminder that 2020 is still the year of NDC revisions, and that our collective commitment to the Paris Agreement can be sustained in these challenging times. Uganda is clear about its next steps in the revision process of the support it finds most meaningful to achieve its goals. Partnership members are responding to Uganda's request for support for the revision of its NDC through the Partnership's Climate Action Enhancement Package, or CAP. We are ready to coordinate closely with our members to provide technical analysis and stakeholder engagement support to ensure an inclusive process. Through CAP, 6 partners, including GIZ, ICLEI, IRENA, the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, UNDP, and UN Environment, are coming together under the leadership of the government to provide a holistic, inclusive process to review, enhance, and raise the ambition of Uganda's NDC. This process will prevent the shortfalls of the first NDC and ensure greater government ownership, greater stakeholder engagement, and a more strategic approach to affirming Uganda's commitment to its national climate goals. Harmonized support for Uganda will also pave the way for new and additional support. We hope that this will encourage the Uganda government to continue to lead globally, raise its bar, and seek a greater ambition at every turn. We look forward today to working with all of you to revise Uganda's NDC, as well as to tomorrow to implement the new NDC and drive transformational action. Through this process, we will not miss the opportunity to learn how to refine and evolve the partnership's approach so that we can all better support countries to achieve increasingly ambitious NDC targets. Thank you for allowing the partnership to be part of this event, and I wish you every success.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Pablo Vieira, for that message. And just to be able to manage time once again, allow me invite Mr. Andrew Okenden. I do hope I pronounced your name right. Feel free to use the microphone on your table, please. Feel free to use the microphone on your table. Mr. Andrew Okenden is the Development Director of the British High Commission, please. We welcome you.
Brilliant. Sorry, I feel terrible not standing. May I come?
It's okay. Fine. I only felt that I needed you to feel comfortable, but it's okay. You can take it there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, everyone. Honourable Minister, parliamentarians, Your Excellencies, representation from the Ugandan government, from civil society, and from the private sector. All protocols observed, and I hope I can say friends. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. Despite the global pandemic, climate change remains the biggest and most urgent challenge facing the world today. African nationals, including Ugandans, and particularly the poorest and most vulnerable, are already seeing firsthand the impact of climate change, despite being the continent that's least responsible for global emissions. You mentioned earlier the floods in Soronko, Kasese, and across the country, and the locust swarms that have already had a profound effect on food security and have cost lives and livelihoods. Unchecked, the economic and social impacts of climate change will be severe, as we all know. Tackling climate change is a foreign policy priority for the UK government. And as COP26 hosts in partnership with Italy, the UK is committed to building momentum and delivering a successful COP. Yesterday, as some of you may have seen, our Prime Minister announced a 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution with some really interesting, innovative targets. So, for example, creating 250,000 green-collar jobs and banning the sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2030. So in the UK, we're really trying to make every effort we can to take radical action to support the fight against climate change. Within this, adaptation and resilience are one of the 5 key campaign focus areas. The others are climate finance, nature-based solutions, energy transition, and clean transport. Through this campaign, we want to encourage greater political ambition, building on the UN Climate Action Summit call to action, to which Uganda and the UK are both signatories, and to agree best practice on adaptation and building resilience. As many of you have said already this morning, effective action is impossible without funding. That's why last year the UK doubled its international climate financing commitment to £11.6 billion, and why as part of this campaign we'll work to increase the availability, efficiency, accessibility of public and private finance for adaptation and resilience. We're also committed to working in partnership with you to protect and enhance Uganda's rich natural environment and biodiversity, and promote sustainable and climate-resilient agriculture. We welcome Uganda's commitment to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature at UNGA, and believe that nature-based solutions can be responsible for as much as 1/3 of necessary emissions mitigation and adaptation actions. But to take this opportunity, the world needs to increase the level of funding for these solutions from the 3% of total climate finance currently committed. Raising this level is also part of the COP26, I'm getting behind myself, COP26 Nature Campaign. As COP26 hosts, we're encouraging all of our international partners worldwide to commit to ambitious climate change action so that together we can meet our joint Paris Agreement commitments. We're not only pushing countries to be more ambitious with emissions reductions, but also adaptation, resilience, and increasing finance. So I'm delighted to be here today to attend the launch of Uganda's NDC revision process and witness your commitment to updating your NDC in advance of COP26 and developing a long-term strategy for emissions reductions. Aim high with your ambition. I'm pleased the UK provides funding to the NDC partnership and has recently agreed to co-finance a climate finance advisor alongside the Netherlands and GGGI. We've ensured our climate programming is aligned to existing NDC priorities, particularly around adaptation and resilience, renewable energy, climate finance, and nature-based solutions. We recognise that we have a continued role to play to support Uganda and to implement your NDC, and we look forward to working with you over coming months to develop your plans, to help you develop your plans. Rest assured, we will also continue to encourage greater ambition, and we're also very aware of our own obligations in this area. On a personal note, I mean, look, a lot of this work is couched in terms of 3-letter acronyms, in terms of agreements, in terms of technical science, in terms of financing agreements, and that's absolutely right. That's as it has to be. That's how we make this happen. But I think it's just really important not to forget the real impact of this on, for example, poor farmers on Uganda, and on the legacy that we decide to leave our children. I was very struck by the National Planning Authority's statement about how many of us will be working when we get to 2050. And I think it's really important that we continue to see beyond the acronyms, continue to see beyond all of the work we're doing into the positive effect that we can have on people's lives. As honest broker for the COP negotiations, we're always keen to hear from and engage with Uganda, and we'll continue to seek as much alignment as possible between COP26 in Glasgow and Africa Climate Week here in Uganda. Your role as strong advocates for ambitious climate change at all levels of government is integral to us achieving our shared aims. Be assured that the UK joins you in this ambition. Many thanks indeed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I expect at some point in time when he talked about financing and did also promise and commit for continued financing and co-financing with other development partners. I expected a hand clap, but I think we are too engrossed in understanding the nitty-gritty and detail of this revised NDC, and maybe we missed out on that. But it's very true that we can have these ambitious plans, but if they're not financed, they may not come to pass. And we do thank all the development partners for ensuring that the environment is an aspect we pay attention to very, very much. Allow me now to invite Ms. Nadia Kanata, who is the first secretary and head Sustainable Development Sector European Delegation to Uganda. So you can feel free to speak from there or want to come here, it's very fine.
Thank you. Honorable Minister for Water and Environment, please allow me to start by saying all protocol observed and by thanking the organizers and the government of Uganda for bringing us together today, because I think we all represent very committed organizations and countries in terms of climate action. I think a lot has been said and a lot of very important issues have already been mentioned. And I would just like from my side to add a little bit the European perspective to this. Indeed, very recently, only in September 2020, the Commission has proposed to raise our ambitions to 55% reduction on greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990. This is quite an ambitious target that will require both concrete actions and legislative procedures, which will continue in the course of 2021. So very similar to what the government of Uganda is going through. Why am I saying this? Because it's very much reflected in the way we cooperate and partner with other countries outside of the European Union. In particular, there is a concept that I would like to mention today, which is the European Green Deal. European Green Deal will be the leading concept of our work, both in the continent and outside. On one side, because as Europe, we want to become the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. And on the other side, because we want to become a world leader on circular economy, environmental protection, and biodiversity. To summarize, this means that we want to put environment and climate change at the heart of our agenda, both in Europe and in the world. This means that together with Uganda, we want to build a green alliance. By green alliance, which we consider as a top priority, we mean by working both at the policy level, which the example of supporting the NDC revision is one of the examples, but also to work on very concrete sectors. How is this translated in the way we do projects and we work together in agriculture, in transport, in energy? These are all extremely important sectors for the NDC, and the whole idea is really to look at them, always keeping in mind the climate perspective and putting it as one of the main priorities. We know that this process is taking place in a very challenging moment. The COVID pandemic has changed a lot of the assumptions that we all had in terms of development when the NDCs were developed. And we recognize that it is essential that by working on this revision, we take into account the future recovery plans. And the two are linked. For a very simple reason, because the whole idea is to try as much as possible to build back better, to promote a green recovery. So the two processes have to go together, and that's why I'm very happy of the words from the colleague from the NPA, because it's essential that the two processes are interlinked. In terms of really the impact, I think all those that were in lockdown in Kampala noticed how much the air changed. We were all breathing better. We had a 68% reduction on emissions in Kampala. Now, definitely stopping the economic development is not the solution, but it made us all think about how can we do better. Maybe there are things in our projects, in our actions, in our policies that can help us not reduce so much, because only a stop in the economic development can reduce so much, but it improving the situation. So this is where we are really here to support you on this green recovery, all of us, all the partners that are around this table. And this is a very important concept that together with the government of Uganda, I think we will sort of lead our cooperation in the near future. We know the challenge. We also know that we are in once in a generation opportunity, probably, to try to address long-term climate environmental crisis in a more sustainable way and try to be more strategic. This is why we want to join forces. We want this process to continue. We are happy to do it together and to walk this path with the other partners, other governments, and the governments. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Nadia Kanata. You did definitely remind me about the lockdown period. It was both good and bad. There is nothing that doesn't have the other side. Fresh air. It was definitely fresh air. And it got me thinking, is it time for us to start cycling to work maybe? Or is it the time now that electric cars should come through? They should be produced like yesterday because the air was extremely fresh. If only we could maintain that, our health would be better and we wouldn't be losing lots of money in wasted of time because we are stuck in jam. I think it's a point to ponder upon. Many of the governments should be thinking about that. And now allow me invite with honor the UNDP resident representative, Ms. Elsie Atafwa. It is a pleasure to have you. And feel free, yes, to use your mic right where you are.
Well, let's see if it works. It does. Okay.
I think it's okay with us.
Yeah.
Very fine.
I think that variety is the spice of life, as they say.
Very much so.
Let me sit here. Okay. Honorable Minister, if you don't mind. Yeah. Honorable Minister of Water and Environment, Honorable Sam Chiptoris, honorable parliamentarians who are here, senior government officials, Excellencies, and I would like to recognize the Ambassador of Germany. I know the Ambassador of Italy is also connected online, several other Excellencies. I want to recognize you and a colleague from the European Union delegation. I also wanted to recognize colleagues from NPA, Dr. Guloba, Madam Maris, she's here, our colleague Paolo from the NDC Partnership Forum, representatives of development partners, UN colleagues who are connected, central and local governments, civil society, private sector, distinguished media. Let me also dwell on existing protocols and say all protocols observed. On behalf of the United Nations Development Programme and indeed our wider United Nations family, let me say how delighted and humbled I am to be here to witness this launch where we set the pace now to revise the NDC. Honorable Chiptoris, let me also personally thank you for your leadership, your personal leadership on this journey and the tremendous efforts that the government of Uganda has made over the years in positioning climate change issues in the national development agenda, but also on the global stage. So thank you very much for that. I also wanted to thank the entire Ministry of Environment and Water for all the work that we have been doing together. Now, I train in part as a teacher, so I would like to break it down because I think there's a lot of work on LTS and NDC, and I'm sure our audience are watching, they're thinking, what are they talking about? Is this a technical conversation or what is it? And so let me try to bring it home for the ordinary person, you and myself and others, to understand what we're talking about. So what is this NDC and why does it matter? What is it? We have established, all of us, that there is climate change. We have seen increased temperatures that we have never seen before. We have seen wildfires that we have never seen before. We have seen droughts that we have never seen before. We have seen, even in our own country, our beautiful pearl of Africa, we have seen the Nile and the Victoria rise since 1964. We haven't seen it before. We have seen wetlands that are moving. We haven't seen it before. So what is it telling us? It is telling us that the environment is changing, the climate is changing, and we need to do something about it. Now, that's something that we need to do about it is a global commitment that in Paris in 2015, as our brother said, agreed that we have to try to reduce the temperatures below 2 degrees. And if possible, let's maintain 1.5. And so that collective effort means that every country, and this is where the NDC comes in, every country needs to commit to what you can contribute to based on your own national circumstances. So as Uganda, we can contribute our forests, we can contribute our tourism, whatever it is, that is the idea of the NDC, that there is an ambition that we have to set because the impact is on all of us. Now, when you take Africa, for example, which is basically our region is very much dependent on nature. Agriculture is on nature, tourism is on nature, so many other things. It means that there is an intersection between climate change and poverty eradication, for example. You cannot reduce poverty when you don't tackle the issues around climate change, because it's linked to water security. If the drought comes, the water dries up. If the water dries up, the children don't have water to drink, the women have to walk 5 kilometers. So we have to start looking at the connection so that it's not seen as something out there called NDC. I'm just trying to bring it home so that we can all follow the conversation. So with this background, the whole idea is that Uganda is a leader in the world, is a leader that has contributed to the Sustainable Development Goals, of which we have the SDG 13 and 15 in particular, also 17, contributing to that global agenda. So the NDC revision allows us an opportunity to be able to do a couple of things. What are they? First, we are able to mobilize partnership across sectors, across governments, across partners. Why does it matter? Because it's not, I know Honorable Chips Torres is here and he's leading that, but a lot of the challenges come from other sectors. So we have to engage agriculture, for example. We have to make sure that agriculture is done in a way that is sustainable. We have to engage energy, for example. Can we use our hydro? Can we use our solar in a way instead of using biomass to cook? What is it that we can do? What about transport? I think somebody talked about electrical cars the other day, just a moment ago. It is important to work together because then collectively we can see where the emissions are coming from. Particularly in developing countries in Africa, about 70 to 20% of emissions come from the agriculture, forest, and land use sector, which means that it's a sector that we have to engage. So the cross-sectoral collaboration becomes important. That is why this launch becomes important, because then we have to be able to share and compare notes together and be able to see what we can do. So that's one thing. The second thing is that I think somebody talked about lessons learned earlier on. What we learned from the first generation of NDCs is that perhaps we didn't have targets that were quantifiable. There wasn't much alignment sometimes between the NDC and the national and sectoral development plans. So again, the revision allows us to be able to align. And I'm glad Dr. Guloba is here talking about the timing of this work, since we do also have the National Development Plan 3, but also importantly that we are moving beyond the NDP just as a document to the program implementation action plans, which also helps us to do that alignment. Now, I think somebody talked earlier on about opportunities for investment. Okay, this is going to come at a cost. And of course, no country wants to be, there are trade-offs. You don't want to say because of climate change, I don't want to develop, I don't want to expand. But then how can you look for different investment opportunities to allow you to grow the way you want to grow, but in a sustainable and a greener way? So what are those investment opportunities? What are those incentives that are required? How can the private sector engage? These are ways in which we can collectively, this review allows us to be able to look at what are the assessments that we need to do, what are the costs for the country, what are the opportunities for the country, and how can we leverage that? So that also becomes a very important part of the conversation. But also finally, this allows us to really improve clarity, transparency, and understanding around a NDC. So I think this process as a whole, whilst we will come out with a product called an enhanced NDC, the process in itself helps with transparency. So I just wanted to pick up on two quick things as now I have set the foundation, and again, why this work matters as we move forward and the timing thereof. I've talked about the NDP 3, so I will not dwell on that, but COVID, and I think our colleague from the EU spoke a bit about that. Whilst COVID has had a very critical impact, both from a health point of view and a social economic point of view, we have also learned lessons from an environment point of view. She talked about the fact that we can see the clouds, we can see the birds, we can see so many things. But I think what is important is the innovation as well that we have seen during this period. I give you a few examples, and I think, Honorable Minister, these are things that perhaps we can try to institutionalize and move forward with as we go along. As UNDP and the UN family, we did provide online collaborative facilities, Zoom and others, to different ministries. I think in the history of Zoom, perhaps we bought the most licenses for the country. Now, what did it actually mean? It meant that people could now have conversations online, engage, and we reduce the kind of workshops that perhaps we would have been doing, but for those collaborative arrangements, which means that we have also, by extension, reduced emissions from the transport sector. Now, is this a new way of engaging in future? Can we have some more conversations online? I know we also have to have physical meetings. What is the kind of mix that we should? And again, this is a very important conversation. We have seen, for example, the impact of COVID on our tourism sector. And it's one of those sectors that has suffered a lot. I mean, we estimate through an assessment we did in the United Nations that we perhaps will lose about 5 billion in 5 years. Now, what have we learned from that process? We've learned that we have to now refocus our strategy on domestic tourism, for example, which in the past maybe we paid attention to, but we didn't pay attention to. But in attempting to do that, we are at the same time addressing issues of climate change. In other words, whilst we are investing in our tourism, it's also a contribution to climate change adaptation and mitigation. So we can have a two-pronged approach where we are able to develop, at the same time also do it in a creative way. We launched also a partnership with Jumia. It's a UNDP Jumia partnership where for the first time we could be able to, we connected the market woman or man in Nakawa, Bugolobi and others to the Jumia platform. Now, what did it actually mean from a climate point of view? You could sit in your house and you could order your food, your banana, your matoke, your plantains, and it comes to you. Instead of moving your V8, you sat in the house, but the border came with it, and you got your thing. These could be innovative ways of still being able to address climate change, but also creating jobs, for example. We started looking at biodegradables, which we hadn't thought about. So when you purchase your product, you don't get it in plastic anymore, you get it in bio. So what I'm trying to say is that as we move forward and we build forward better, I think COVID recovery and resilience building has taught us some lessons that we need to do differently as part of our NDC ambitions, as I'll call it. And finally, I just wanted to touch a bit on some of the work that we have done with the youth. I think as we move forward and as we talk about ambition and targets, we also have to see how we mainstream some of these things into ongoing activities. We have just launched recently in the UN family together with Stambik, the Youth for Business Facility. It's incredible the kind of proposals that are coming from a climate point of view. And therefore, our ability to invest in some of these things have the potential to create jobs and at the same time be able to help us address some of the climate challenges that we're talking about. So, Honorable Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to start concluding by thanking you once again for your personal leadership and that of the government of Uganda for this important milestone. It's very exciting and I believe we can do a lot with it. I would like to thank our development partners, the EU, the German government, the Spanish government for their contributions to the NDC partnership, but also to all our core donors who have in many different ways contributed financially and technically to the work that we do, particularly our work in the United Nations family in support of these processes. And I'd like to thank the UK government through you for your dedication and support. You would be hosting COP26 in Glasgow. It's a big undertaking. And so congratulations for that, and thanks for the leadership, and as well recognize the leadership of the government of Italy that are co-organizing the COP in Glasgow together with you. I also wanted to thank our partners in GIZ, NDC Partnership, the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, our sister agencies, particularly FAO, colleagues who are here, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, our colleagues are here, our UN Environment colleagues, they're based in Nairobi, who are also listening in, the World Meteorological Organization, for our combined efforts, really. And for us in the UN, we are very delighted because we recently had our United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework launched by His Excellency the President. And one of the pillars that we do have in there is on climate change and overall resilience building. And we look forward to supporting this work as we move forward. So the journey has just begun. I think what will be crucial moving forward is our work together with government, civil society, private sector, religious organization, traditional organization on the NDC revision. Again, to simplify it, we are trying to work together to reduce the greenhouse gases as a result of different things that happen, agriculture, forestry, deforestation, and all that. And I believe our collective efforts would yield dividends for Uganda and indeed for our African region and the globe as a whole. So once again, on behalf of the United Nations Development Programme and the United Nations family, I wish to reiterate our commitment and support to this journey. We take it seriously, we take it as part of our core work, and we believe very strongly that the agenda of the world today, which is also on the Sustainable Development Goals, and the whole conversation around leave no one behind, we can only achieve that if we work together on climate change issues. And again, climate change and poverty eradication are so interlinked, and we need to look at them and work together on them. Thank you very much and for your attention.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Althea Tafwa, the UNDP resident representative. I think you also forgot that we worked from home during COVID-19, and maybe our bosses need to think more about that, other than having to drive all our cars and get to office and the emissions that do come through. And also, when the Res Rep did talk about the cross-sectoral collaboration, I think she highlighted something that is very key that governments need to pay attention to, and that is the private sector, how they get involved, how they are brought on board to ensure that, because many a times when such discussions are being held, the feeling amongst the private sector or a cross-section of the private sector is that that belongs to government. That is government and the development partners. It concerns them and not us. So how they're brought on board is very, very key. As we draw a little bit closer to the conclusion, but of course we know that much later on, we are going to have key discussions still with regard to our debate today. Much later on, we'll have a discussion on the development of the long-term climate change strategy that will be coming up later. Also, the UNDP climate promise and scope of the NDC revision process and the findings from the metabolic assessment. Those will also be coming through later on with the discussions. But for now, allow me invite Mr. Oloya Collins, the Director, Environment Affairs, who also did represent the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Water and Environment today, to kindly invite our guest of honor today, the Minister of Water and Environment, Honorable Sam Cheptoris. So I do invite you, Mr. Oloya Collins, to take on that. Feel free if you want to speak from where you are or come here, whichever you choose.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, you have heard why we are here, the objectives of revising the NDC and the need to develop the long-term strategy for climate change. You have heard from keynote addresses from His Excellency's presence and the technical officers in the relevant institutions globally, nationally, internationally. That it's now important for us to revise the current NDC to meet the targets, to exploit the existing opportunity you heard from the different keynote addresses. Now, time has come for the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Water and Environment, to invite the Minister of Water and Environment, Honorable Sam Cheptoris, to come and launch this conversation officially so that we recognize its scope and relevance for Uganda to do so. So it is my single honor at this moment to invite you to make a opening remarks, and then we take group photos that will mark the first sessions of our sitting here. Thank you very much. Honorable, you are most welcome.
Allow me to, am I being heard? Oh, you go there. Thank you, Mildred. I'm told you are I always watch you on TV. You are a very interesting lady. The head of European Union delegation in Uganda, the ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, the resident representative, United Nations Development Programme, the development director of the British High Commission, the chairperson of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Climate Change, the NDC Partnership Global Director, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Water and Environment, the Director, Debt and Cash Management, Ministry of Finance, the Executive Director, National Planning Authority, representatives of central government ministries, representatives of the private sector, all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I join you all at the launch of the NDC enhancement process in Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, Uganda is a country that has undergone remarkable development, but the country is also still faced with huge but surmountable challenges amidst a rapidly growing population and climate change. The country regularly faces challenges of floods, droughts that cause great havoc in terms of displacement of the people, destruction of infrastructure, destruction of people's livelihoods, and the general impact on socio-economic development of the country. The government of Uganda is therefore committed to the universal commitments and announcements contained in the Paris Agreement. And I will continue to contribute towards the global climate change efforts. This will be done through fulfilling our NDCs and making progressive contribution to the universal efforts to accelerate concrete initiatives and augment climate change action to mitigate the impact of climate change and to make the world a better place to live in over the years and decades to come. As you may be aware, under the Paris Agreement, countries are invited to communicate updated NDCs to the NFCCC every 5 years. This is due to the need to enhance the quality of NDCs, increase ambition, and translate efforts into continuous improvement towards a low-carbon development pathway. Furthermore, under the Paris Agreement, the first global stock take will happen in 2023. It will assess whether the net result of the climate change actions being taken was consistent with the goal of keeping the increase in global average temperatures from the pre-industrial times to within 2 degrees Celsius. Thus, the process to update Uganda's NDCs is very timely and needs the support of everybody. Tackling climate change through NDCs is one of the most effective ways for us as a country to achieve transformation at various levels and scales. Ladies and gentlemen, the success of the NDC update process for Uganda will require buy-in and the ownership by all stakeholders, extensive stakeholder engagement, stakeholder coordination and collaboration, as well as communication, awareness raising, and knowledge sharing. I therefore request all of you to be part of the NDC enhancement process and make contributions through debate and dialogue, and build momentum for climate action that will allow delivery of tangible results at the local and international levels. As a country, we are keen on this process because there is no doubt that the climate is changing in Uganda. Temperatures are rising, hot days are increasing, rainfall patterns are uncertain, and extreme events are escalating. Furthermore, the impacts of climate change on climate-sensitive sectors, which are crucial for Uganda's economic development and its people, and its people's well-being, are very clear and evident. At this juncture, I would like to appreciate the contributions of all the development partners that are supporting Uganda in the NDC update process. These include, among others, UNDP, European Union, the British government, and the German government. In a special way, I wish to thank UNDP that has partnered with my ministry through the Climate Change Department to organize this event. I'm greatly convinced that the systematic, country-driven, and proactive approach we have embarked on in the NDC enhancement process is a positive step in the right direction, and I will have everybody play that direct and a pivotal role in the national climate change response. I trust that the engagement of all stakeholders during this launch shall collectively propel us to practical solutions and contribute to addressing the ambitious climate change agenda for many years to come. It is now my singular honor and a privilege to officially launch the Uganda NDC enhancement process. And thank you for listening to me.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Sam Cheptoris, for your kind remarks. And I know that the Ministry of Water and Environment will be taking up this very seriously. Just before we take on our group photo, which will be closing this session, and like I did say earlier on, that there will be another other discussions, extensive discussions that are going to be coming through just shortly. Just some points to ponder upon is that while we continue to talk about climate change and environment, it is incumbent upon us to take on the fight. When you move to that counter at the supermarket, do you take the Kavera or polythene bag that is given to you? How do you utilize it? Many at times, for the supermarkets I go to, they know when Mildred comes and she's done shopping, it's either a box or she will have a reusable bag with her. Many of us probably do not pay attention to it, buy whatever you have, and then the disposal is where the problem comes about. And for respect of our environment, especially talking about the forest cover, we've lost quite a tremendous percentage of the forest cover, especially right here in Uganda? And as you, what do you get to do about planting another tree, planting many other trees each and every day that goes by? So I am happy that this review is coming through and that it is going to be aligned with the Vision 2040, and that whereas we are thinking about industrialization, how best, like the res rep did say, how best can we do our industrialization? How do we bring on board the other sectors, agriculture, energy? How do we bring them on board to ensure that we support each other and protect our environment? And once again, I'll say it and let it forever stick. We can't live without the environment, but it can live without us. And of course, I want to say thank you to our audience that has been watching us online. It will definitely continue even with the forthcoming discussions. And let's continue keeping this discussion ongoing online using the hashtag NDC Revision UG or NDC Revision for our global audience, and then hashtag climate emergency as well. And for now, we'll be saying bye to our online, the audience on air, but we'll continue with this discussion. And right about now, I would like to invite all our keynote speakers to take a group photo. And I would just request probably Gloria, to help me with the other people that we will be expecting. But kindly to all our keynote speakers, please stand up. We would like to take, do we need to first take this very one while they're seated? All right. Okay, let's stand up. We have said bye to our audience on television, so now we can enjoy our time. I can.